you cannot have just a data scientist that doesn't know anything about scale. You can find a candidate that will look really good in this kind of assesses, okay? But when he comes, you will see that he knows maybe 20% of what he showed in these tests. I imagine that people sit in an interview and surprised from their own CV. The disinformation generally that is currently in the world is also entering our hiring process, and it's hard. It's even hard mentally.
Well, Ariel, great to see you. Be great to start by understanding a bit more about Intent IQ, learning more about the company and the product.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me here. It's very nice to be here. So IntentIQ is an identity resolution company in the EdTech business. We exist for more than 20 years now, and we have over 170 patents. Some of them are licensed to Google and Microsoft. Generally, what we do is identity resolution. We specialize in the cookieless environment, which is a harder environment, but I think the big money is in this environment. Okay, it's much harder. The scale is really huge, and actually, it brings me to what we're talking about, which is recruiting data scientists. Because when you have to do big scale, there are some features you need in the data scientists that sometimes maybe it's how to assess. Okay, you can't just give them a task which includes big data. Okay, so yes, and generally we sell. Our clients are usually the publishers, ad sellers, and ad buyers.
And this cookieless environment, I guess, is becoming more and more common now. I hear every year about the death of the cookie. I guess it hasn't quite happened yet, but it's certainly on its way.
First of all, it's on its way. Well, it's mostly with Apple. You know, the Apple devices, the iPhones, but the big fear of this whole industry is what will happen when it will happen also in Chrome devices, in Chrome browsers. So yeah, it's becoming big. It's good that we already have the solutions before that, before that it's deprecated.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. You guys are ahead of the game, clearly. So, in a good position to capitalize on the death of the cookie. The death of the cookie is your win, basically.
Yes, not nice to say, but yes.
Okay, and so you kind of touched on already there some of the challenges in hiring data professionals into your team. So, one is just the sheer scale of the data you deal with is atypical by the sounds of it. And at least among non-tech companies for sure. So it'd be good to hear more about why the scale matters, and then what are the other challenges that you've had in the past in hiring data scientists.
So first of all, the scale matters because it's another, let's say, quality that the data scientist should be able to do. Um, I, let's say I divide it to two parts. You have the parts of the creativity, the algorithm development, understanding feature and everything. And then you have you can say data engineering part. And the data engineering part is, you can be good at one, but less in the other. So when you're looking for both, it makes it a little harder. Second of all, when I want to test them, when I have candidates and I want to test the candidates, for how well they will be fit for our company. So it's easier to test, with small tasks, tasks that, they test creativity, understanding, but you can't really give it as a task. So usually you need to, just ask questions that will say how much experience the candidate has in big data. Another option is to just take data engineers and data scientists, but I find it harder to work with. Okay, because then you need to explain yourself twice every time. So I really prefer to hire people that know both. which makes it a little harder.
Yeah. And I would have thought at a certain scale, eventually those roles would have to specialize. Like if your company was, I don't know, 10x the current size of it, do you feel like then you'd have the dedicated data engineers and the data scientists would be separate?
Yeah, well, first of all, we started doing it lately. We're now hiring also a data engineer, the first data engineer, because of this scale. I still think that you cannot have just a data scientist that doesn't know anything about scale, although the data engineering will do most of the job. Because sometimes you can't do things the way you want when you know that scale will be involved, okay, and you have to change it accordingly. So you should know what you're doing, okay?
Right. So be like, I don't know, a, a database manager working under the understanding of how the data is actually used. So making sure the database is optimized for the website, that they understand its user base, not the fact that they're a front-end engineer themselves, they're a designer, they're not doing it, but they have to have some contextual understanding. Otherwise, it's just not going to work.
I came from algorithm development, and in the beginning, I wasn't aware that you can't just do anything you want. Some things the scale actually limits you, so it's important to understand it.
And is it the case then that, your team currently, this kind of profile of a data scientist stroke data engineer, you would take someone who's relatively stronger on one or the other side, and then you'd kind of be upskilling them where they're a little bit weaker? Is that your approach?
Well, usually yes, and usually because I come from algorithms, I will usually take the people with the soft skills, first of all, the creativity and the things that I can assess. It's really harder to assess candidates about their big data skills. Sometimes I also ask for someone from the databases to help me in this. But generally, my exams that I give the candidates is usually based on algorithms and data science and feature extractions, but maybe special features or let's say intelligent features. And I will not rule out candidates that has less experience in the big data issue, but I do think it's important.
So, other than finding candidates who maybe have a bit of a crossover of these two areas and then dealing with the high scale or large scale of data, any other obvious big challenges that spring to mind for hiring data talent at the moment?
I think one of the hardest challenges, and we made a couple of iterations until we made it good. I'm in this company for 4 years, but before I was in another company, and in the beginning, so it's really hard to assess first of all how they will work with you. Okay, well, how will be the day-to-day work? So in the beginning, we used to give an exam that you take. We will send you an exam to your email, and you will work on it alone for 3 to 4 days. Then you will explain what you did, and this resulted in sometimes situations that the assessments were really off what it was supposed to be. I mean, you can find a candidate that will look really good in this kind of assesses, okay? But when he comes, you will see that he knows maybe 20% of what he showed in these tests. I don't know exactly why. Maybe, when you give him all the time he wants, he can also consult with his friends. And this is a big issue because, people need work and I don't blame them for, for trying. So we stopped this. And then we passed to it's some kind of a shorter exam, but the candidates would come to our offices and do it. So in this case, you know that they are doing it alone. And they did it, and sometimes they did it well. So this was better, but still, it lacked one important thing, to see how we work together. I think that specifically in my team, I work very close with each the data scientist. we sit together every day, and brainstorming is a big part of the work. Okay, so when you do a lot of brainstorming, you need to have this, this ping pong to feel that the candidates or the employee understands you and you understand him, and there will not be some nodding because no one really understands each other. So we changed this to a desk where me and him are working together. This is a little hard because I already know the solution, but you need to actually mimic a real work day. This is, I think, the best way for me to assess a candidate. You mimic what you will actually do in work. Not first of all in the specific task. The task can be similar to what you do, okay? But try the best you can to actually mimic what you do in the daily routine. And when we started this, we have really great employees currently.
Yeah, I think that's the trick, isn't it? Making sure the hiring process is as close as practically possible to the real work, because it's very hard to do really good at something that's 99% of the same job as you're about to get and then not be good at the same job. Surely it's going to be a better predictor of on the job performance. I guess most people would say the devil's advocate to that is the level of effort that you would need to go through, because you're in there in that final meeting, you're actually engaging with them. They're not doing the take-home test in their own time and just presenting, you're actually sparring with them. So it must be a challenge to make sure by the time you've got people at that bottom of the funnel, that at least the odds of them being good is very high. So you don't end up doing a lot of interviews. Have you experienced that or iterated through that?
Of course, this is a great point, and exactly what you say. If it's hard, I need to. Sometimes there are times that you have 2 candidates a day, so you don't have time to work. So it's really important that you focus and you take only the ones that are good. And this is where solutions like your can help. First of all, I think in the screening part, it's very important. You don't want to lose anybody that can be good, but you need to screen for CVs, and you need to screen for, after you screen for CV, you need to understand that the CV actually reflects what the candidate knows. So a lot of this kind of, in the beginning, we wrote a short test we didn't have HR yet, so we had a secretary that will give them the exam, a really short exam, and then we read it and see if they can continue. So yeah, this is, I think, very important. And the best way will be, to have some kind of digital screening or something that will work, and then you are left with a few good candidates, and with them you can do this assessment.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see where these assessments go, because, yeah, from our perspective, we've always been in this interesting space where we've got a product that's quite structured, which has some upside but some downside as well, because it's not going to give you the same depth of insight as a customized assessment based on your data, where you have that, as you said, that ping pong sparring with them. You're going to learn a lot more. You're going to get a lot more breadth and depth of understanding. But I guess it's about having almost like the right tool in the right position of the funnel. I wonder whether we'll get to a point with large language models where they could interpret this unstructured input and output a lot better. And you could almost have something that is almost as customized and in depth as your assessment, but still maybe with the benefits of some kind of automation.
Yeah, I'm sure that this is currently still not the case, but as things are going with the LLMs, we will all be replaced. So I'm sure that eventually this will be a very good way to assess. And yeah, but I think in the next few years we are somewhere in the middle of this automation. This is up to you, to you guys to find what is the best way. It's currently, I think the screening process is very important because it can take more than a month to find somebody, and every day it's really hard.
And one thing we're hearing a lot about, speaking of screening, is a lot of companies getting inundated with many, many CVs, many, many applications, where they feel like a lot of them have been written or optimized using ChatGPT or some kind of large language model. And then maybe in some cases, the candidates are also applying with some kind of automation tool to like many different roles. Is that something that you've noticed as well in your market?
Well, ChatGPT is relatively new, but I think ChatGPT doesn't really change much of the original problem, which is that the CVs are always, you can say, exaggerated. Maybe I would say that with ChatGPT everything is easier. So they don't even have to be good at at writing CV. This is another thing that the machine can do for them. But I think that usually CVs can be very misleading. This is a big problem. In the beginning, when we interviewed, everything looked really good in the CV. It was really okay. So I want this guy and this guy and this guy, and then you understand that this is really not the case. When I look at CV, I try to look only at the bottom line. If you have a degree in computer science, then you have a degree in computer science. Or if you work with a specific model, XGBoost or deep learning, then I know I will assume that you're telling the truth. But but you know when you go down to the high resolution of the CV, usually it's not true. So this is a very big problem. And another thing is the automation. That when people can just but by the way, it's always it's also the other way around. I guess sometimes a job description can sound better than it is. Okay, because the companies also want to attract good candidates. Um, but I think the automation process where people can just send their CV, well, this is also a big problem because when you have like 20 CVs, it's one thing, but when you have 200, then it's not something that the person can do on its own. You must do it some way automatically, and you don't want to, you want to choose right. Okay, you don't want the ones that wrote better CV with ChatGPT to be the one that you examine.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see where this is going. I feel like the problem's going to get worse before it gets better. Personally, I'm not trying to be cynical, but that seems to be where it's going. And one other layer that companies have told me recently is yeah, there's a lot more applications. They seem to be more likely to be written with ChatGPT than not, which maybe in itself is okay. But the other related problems are, oh, all these CVs look amazing. They all seem to match the job description very well. If I have 100 CVs that all look equally good, which one do I interview? So that's the same problem. And then to your point before around CVs have always been a dreadful indicator of who is worth interviewing. There's a sense, I haven't got any measurement for this, but there's a sense that maybe that's even worse now. I wonder if, because as a candidate, if I have to lie on my CV, that's me writing that lie. For most people, that's going to be difficult to do. You might exaggerate, you might not lie completely, but now it's almost like you can outsource the morality to the large language model and go, well, I didn't lie, it hallucinated. It's almost like a get out.
Yeah, first of all, one solution is to bring morality to the LLMs. One day, maybe. Yes, I agree. And also, another thing is that it's really hard to make your CV fit to the specific job on many jobs. When you send it yourself to 3 jobs, maybe. But if you're going to do 100 jobs, then everything is automatic. You don't even have time to read what the ChatGPT wrote for you. You just, I imagine that people sit in interview and surprised from their own CV.
I have a master's degree in statistics. Oh wow, when did I do that? That was amazing. I'm very proud of myself. I did it in my sleep. Uh, I'm interested then actually flipping it around because of what we're seeing happening now. Imagine you yourself were going for a job in a few months. Would your strategy differ? Like, would you use this sort of almost spray and pray approach applying to jobs boards, or would you use a different approach? Like, how would you attack it?
Specifically in our field, I think that I would maybe use ChatGPT by fitting the CV to the specific job for every job. I don't think that I will do it, in a machinely manner that I will send to 200 places. I would probably start with 10 that I can actually know what we're talking about. I think maybe and maybe I'm old school. Right? I don't know if this is still the case. Uh, and I think also that if this is the situation and we're going to use more and more solution like yours because of what we say about the CV that you cannot screen with, so you must screen in another way. You must add insert automations. So I think that one of the effects will be that the candidates will be willing to participate in this because um, sometimes candidates say, okay, so I have 20 interviews. It's I'm going to, it's a lot of job. It's a lot of work. I need to do this and this and this, and I think if it becomes the standard, then when something becomes a standard, then everybody just does it. Then nobody will complain that if it's hard or if it's time consuming. Because what other way do we have in an automatic world? Everything, the scale increases.
Yeah, it's just going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. Uh, do you feel like there's any bits of the hiring process that can't be replaced or are not going to be replaced by technology or AI anytime soon?
I think if the work environment and the jobs themselves, let's assume that they will stay the same, then I think it will be very hard to replace the ping pong part the brainstorming part when you really assess. This is something that because we are not machines and because you need to feel that when you brainstorm, you understand each other, um, as I said before. So I think this part is the hardest one to replace. Maybe it can be actually it's hard to think how, but maybe it can be helped with automation somehow. For sure, the stages before maybe we could make them shorter and more automatic. This is really hardest part.
I wonder if there'll be like a Ariel interview bot in a year or so, a deep fake version of you, which has that sparring. It's trained to you and the types of questions you would ask and how you engage with the candidate. Or maybe it's 90% close enough that it's almost good enough.
And then it will also decide for if to hire or not. But I think when we reach this stage, then why wouldn't even need me for anything? I mean, if it can do this, I'm sure it can do anything else I can do. So this is a more philosophical argument for the future.
It is indeed. What about actually just thinking about candidates using these tools in the hiring process? Like, what is your actual view on that? Do you view it as it's cheating, or is it they have to use them because why would I not want them to use these groundbreaking technologies in their job, or is it somewhere in between? Like, how do you think about candidates using these tools?
You can always use before ChatGPT also when you gave an assignment to a candidate, you could always use Google. I would never, send him an assignment and say, listen, do it, but don't ask Google anything, nothing, just work without your computer because in the day-to-day job, you will. And also, if it is a coding assignment, I have no problem that he will use ChatGPT because this is how it's done now. This is how it's done today. The only thing is that it makes it harder to write the assignment because you need to write an assignment that the candidate will show with the existence of ChatGPT, still you need to see that the candidate is good enough, which is now harder, especially by the way for coding, because maybe data science is a little easier. So yeah, I think it's okay that they use it for this part, for the CV. Also, anything that I would do, I think it's okay. Um, what I didn't like before is that it looks like many times they used a human friend to help them, and then you're actually interviewing the friend, but the friend is not the one who's coming to work for you.
Yeah, and I feel like that's clearly worse because once you get in the job, presumably you still have access to the AI, whereas your friend isn't sitting next to you 24 hours a day. So
No, I'm sorry. I'm saying if he did, it would probably also want the salary. So
those pesky humans, they want to get paid, don't they?
yes, that's what's good with AI.
One thing we've noticed in the hiring market at the moment is there's almost a sense of increasing distrust, I would say, on both sides. Maybe this is mirrored in general society. Maybe it's not just related to hiring, but lots of candidates would say, oh, yeah, these job ads are bullshit, or there's lots of fake job ads. Companies are just trying to boost themselves, and companies on the other side are saying, well, hang on, this CV is nonsense. 10% of or 20% of this is a lie. Um, is this as big a problem as it seems, or have we overhyped this already? What do you think?
I think that it is a problem, and I think it is increasingly being increasingly worse. If you're talking about high level, generally, what's going on with the culture today, and the networks and everything, but specifically for so when it happens, in the social networks and everything becomes distrustful and everything is made by machines, so you can't know who really made it. So first of all, yes, I'm sure, I think I see it, it really works these days, but the two things will maybe can help to improve it. First of all, standardization. I think maybe it's easier said than done. If there will be some kind of standardization, you can't just say anything you want, or there will be some kind of baseline. Okay, so I did this, and this in the CV, and also in the work. This will be very good, but for this we need a company like yours, but to be so big that everybody will just straighten up itself according to the new let's say morals. And the other thing maybe will be some kind of peer review. Today there are reviews from anything, for the taxi driver and for the restaurant and everything. So this is something that, unless we can fake, if this will be a good procedure, this can be something that will help it. Because let's say a big company, uh, they will have a lot of reviewers, people that work there, people that interviews there. So it's harder to lie or to exaggerate. And this could be some kind of possible solution. Currently, without this solution, I think you're right. I think people feel that the disinformation generally that is currently in the world is also entering our hiring process, and it's hard. It's even hard mentally.
It's hard, and I think it's especially hard because models like ChatGPT are so good at making something that seems at a first pass good, especially if you don't have any knowledge in that area yourself. So I could ask it to write me I don't know, a legal document. I'm not a lawyer. And I'd look at it and go, wow, that probably looks as good as a real legal document to me. Maybe a lawyer can scrutinize it and quickly go, hang on, like this is wrong, this is ridiculous, this is wrong. So I feel like that's its danger, is it could be the world's greatest spam engine.
The question is, who will read all this spam? Because we need also the contra, the ChatGPT that will read all the spam and the emails for us. And also, we are, let's say, we work in data science, but this is our expertise. But reading CVs is not exactly my expertise. It's more maybe of an HR expertise. So I can also be fooled by these tools. And yes, I think it's like if you look at deep fake, maybe 40 years ago, if you saw a picture, then you were certain it's true. Then you had Photoshop. But now a picture doesn't mean anything. So in the same manner, CV will not mean anything. It will only make it harder. The level will be just higher and higher, and all the CVs will look as perfect as all the others. So it's like, don't even send CV.
Yeah, well, funny you mentioned that because I started to then think, okay, well, if I were a candidate, what would I be doing now? I probably would stop thinking about an inbound funnel of applying to a job ad. I'd be thinking about, oh, who do I know? I go back to like trying to get going through the back door, basically trying to leverage my networks that I've built up. But if you're a junior candidate or you come from a disadvantaged background or a lesser university or you haven't been to university and you're starting from zero, then you have to basically fight it out with everyone else, I guess.
Yes, which will be for sure really hard just to get an interview. It depends on the market, but yes, uh, that's why we need this kind of baseline. You know, it's like you can be first in your class, then you compare to the class. Everybody knows that you're first in your class, so you have this kind of comparison. It's really hard to let the employers see you in this sea of CVs that everything looks the same and not real.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we would need some new data set. Maybe it's the peer reviews. Maybe it's people are going to have to be publicly sharing their work more. Like 99 point whatever percent of what we do would end up in Confluence documents and Jira tickets and emails and blah, 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 blah. I imagine a co-pilot kind of tool that's sitting across all of these must have a very good understanding of what you've actually done in the past 5 years. If it sits in that ecosystem, maybe it could be the one creating this real CV about you is actually getting your real accomplishments, which, to be honest, would be hard for anyone to remember anyway, unless they were going through and documenting that as they go. So maybe it's just we need new data or new data brought to the fore or something.
I think this is a very good solution would be also it will be a standard and everybody will use it and you don't even have to think about using it because it's always in the background and it will assess you. Problem is what happens when you are on the lower part of the candidates, but I guess that's always a problem.
Another angle, actually, which we haven't spoken about, is I feel like the way hiring's traditionally been done has not been the fairest. There are clearly biases that already exist. I'll give you one interesting example just in Australia, and I'm sure there's other similar experiments in other countries. So some researchers from the University of Sydney compiled tens of thousands of CVs, split them into three groups. The groups of CVs were similar to each other, except their names were different. So in one group, it had Anglo-Saxon first and last name. The second group had a Anglo-Saxon first name, Chinese last name. The third group had Chinese first and surname. They then applied at scale to thousands of jobs in Sydney and Melbourne and measured the rate at which those CVs got a callback. And to cut a long story short, the first group had a 12% callback rate. The third group had a 4% callback rate. So basically, if the only difference between you and anyone else in Australia is you have a Chinese name, you have only 1/3 the chance of getting a callback, which is ridiculously unfair. If I had Chinese children, I would be very annoyed with that fact. And so I feel like there's a lot of systemic issues. Could AI improve those? Could AI even exacerbate those? What do you think?
First of all, it's surprising. It's really surprising. I think that if if you want to solve this, that first of all, AI can be trained not to look at. I mean, if you train it properly, it should not look at these things. Question is, why are the employers look at these things? Do they actually think, or maybe it's something in the back of their minds, or like actually think that they are better off with somebody with Anglo-Saxon name, and even if you start applying without names, okay, then if they really think that they don't want Chinese employees, then it will not, okay, so you will get the interview, but you will not get the job. So first of all, for sure, it's not fair, and it's something that needs to be changed. I think the fact that you bring AI can really help, and maybe the CEOs and the management should somehow enforce this using of AI to stop this. Because yes, it's surprising, and I think maybe it's if you look in a high level view, you're talking about names and nationalities, but in a low level views, it can be something. It doesn't really have to be are you Chinese or not. It's just how I like these kind of people, or this kind of people. And, people that are more like me in some way that I don't even know how to exactly say, but I feel it. This is also something that AI can solve. I don't know if it's I don't know if you want AI to solve it, because sometimes you actually work better with somebody that you want to work with.
It is. And I feel like in theory, the AI model could be a dramatic improvement to this process because, as you say, it could only. I think part of the challenge with the CV is so much of it is noise. Like I don't need to know at that stage their ethnicity, their religion, what they look like, where they went to school, how old they are. Like that is all irrelevant. Yet it's shoved in front of my face. So even if I try my best, I'm still human. I can still see these things even if I'm unaware of them. So at least an AI should not have that emotion, and or it could be fed only the data. Like maybe there's a two-step process. It extracts the information, removes the noise, then makes a decision. Surely that could be a big improvement, I feel, in theory, based on what we currently have.
And I think yeah, if there is a possibility that you will give the name and it will learn, the exact thing we don't want it to learn. Also, it would be nice if the CVs will just not include these. You will have some kind of candidate ID, and nobody will know it. So maybe it will make it easier. Eventually, you will reach the final interview, and also there is also a question if so eventually when you interview, your goal is to find the best employee that will make the most value for the company. And this not only means how he works, but it also means how he works with other people, and how the entire team will work. So then you start thinking, maybe I do want somebody that will fit the team more in socially. Okay, I can't say what exactly it means. Okay, let's say people that you like to work with. Okay, you maybe you will prefer somebody with less experience, but you feel that is nicer and easy to work with. It's not even. I think this is also even okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's fun as well. I think that companies, when they hire, should just make that like an explicit criteria. So let's say you've got these technical skills you want them to have that are maybe a bit more measurable. I would have no problem with a company then saying, you know what, 30% of the weighting is going to be likability. And everyone who interviews them is just going to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 on how much they like them. That's fine to me. If you say you hate them or you love them, but like if that matters to get along with people and have a good team culture, then fine. But I feel like a lot of the time it's like an unconscious thing in the back of their head rather than explicitly saying on paper, this is how much I like them.
Yes, and I wonder how because if somebody really doesn't want to hire Chinese employees, then maybe when it comes to this, when they ask him if they like him, it will like him less. So the question, how is it actually preventable if we can actually completely prevent this unfairness?
Yeah. I feel like it's possible to chip away to not get rid of it completely. You're right. If someone ultimately is either explicitly or implicitly against Chinese people, eventually they're going to rate them lowly. At least in that scenario, though, that would be really interesting to get to the end of a process and have 5 interviewers rate a candidate on likability. 4 of them give them an 8 and 1 of them gives them a 2. Because then that person who's given them a 2 would be like, okay, why have I given them a 2? What's behind that? What was like, if you dig deep enough in the psychological reasoning, hopefully you'd almost uncover the bias in a way, I imagine.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're data scientists and we work with algorithms and mathematics, but so much psychology and human behavior is inside this field, and maybe it's more of an HR field, right? But you can't let HR do everything because eventually you're the one that is working with the employee, and it's now what we're talking about it. I think about it that when you hire a manager, then and one of the skills that he needs is some kind of hiring ability. So you need to take this also into account.
Yeah, you're right. That's an underappreciated skill unto itself, is the ability to hire and recruit, that probably for a lot of data leaders, they would never get taught. They just sort of learn it themselves and figure it out as they go along.
Yeah, I think that in my case, for sure, I started, I didn't know anything about hiring, and I made a lot of mistakes. And with time, it improved, and we see and we changed, and yeah, you live and learn.
Speaking of HR and talent acquisition, so they're, yeah, an interesting bit of this puzzle. Uh, my view is that often talent and HR teams would struggle to do the screening for technical roles because they themselves aren't data scientists, they aren't software engineers, and those roles are a very long way away from something that they know. So it's, I would say, in some sense, we've given them an impossible job, I feel. Um, what's your view of how HR and talent have done screening for technical roles? What do you view as the way they approach the problem?
I think you're correct. It's a problem. Usually, specific maybe if they work in the same workplace for 20 years, and they will start understanding specifically what is going on with this field. But generally, yes, they come from a more psychological background and social background, and they really this is not their field, and you see it all the time. They don't exactly understand what you want, and even if you put it in words, okay, so you put it in words, but people can write similar words which are not exactly, and it's really hard. And I think their part is mostly to see that they fit to the organization, and that they are okay and handle the process. Problem is that if you have a big company and you want somebody like HR to to help you with the process, but I agree that they can't give it to you. So what will you do? Will you have some kind of new position, which is a technical HR? That because, for example, I'm technical. I don't want to work in HR. Usually, the technical people want to work in the technical field. So yeah, I think this is also a place where your solution might.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't envy talent people because they, in my experience, are sometimes the most overworked, underappreciated people in a company who've been given almost an impossible task to run the hiring process for a wide variety of roles, none of which they've ever done themselves. To me, that sounds impossible, frankly.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it, I mean, it's not fair that we judge them, that they don't know what specifically we know in our field because we work in this field, and then they will go to another job with a total different thing, and then so it will be the same all over again. Yeah, it's true. Something that should be somehow separated between the hiring, the more sociological part, or
And I think that um, the fact that they have the soft skills, the company culture, the maybe the more psychological background, I feel like that maybe then flavors how they view candidates because they'll always view them through the lens of how did they interact with me? Do I feel like they're a good cultural fit? I feel like they personally maybe overweight that because they're not in a position to judge the technical skills. What do you think?
Yes, I agree. There should be some kind of scoring system where they can only talk about this part, the part of the interactions and the the psychological behavior and everything, because really in the part in the field that they don't know about, they didn't study, and this employee went to the university and studies mathematics, and they didn't. So I don't think that should even be expected to do this part. Should be divided.
And is it a challenge then that people in data roles, or let's say any really technical field, often very smart people, have maybe less good social skills in inverted commas, that then must mean that lots of, like slightly awkward geniuses must struggle to get past those initial stages?
Yes, I think that the HR eventually gets used to understand that this is the level they're expecting you, and that it's. I agree that in the beginning they will say, okay, but maybe it's not doesn't fit enough, in the behavior, and then they understand that everybody is like this in the field. So yes, but also if everybody is like this, it's probably harder to evaluate because these people are harder to evaluate in this manner.
Yes, it must be so challenging. Uh, One final question for you is, what about for candidates? So candidates listening to this, who we've talked about a lot of doom and gloom of, the challenge of getting jobs in this AI era. Uh, but what I think would be helpful for them to know is uh, what's going to improve their chances of success. If you think back to the candidates who you've hired and those who you haven't hired, are there certain common factors, like typical reasons why candidates would fail to ultimately get an offer?
Yes, first of all, unfortunately, I feel it's something that it's hard for the candidates to change, specifically in my case, because they don't know exactly what will be the assessment, and I want to see that they understand me and I understand them. So it's something that is hard to teach. But for me, I would say maybe it's naive, but be as real as you can. Don't exaggerate and don't and just do your best and be real. Um, I think for me it helps. It's hard to not to not show your real self in the interview. So just be yourself.
Yeah, that's a great bit of advice that applies to recruitment, probably applies to dating as well, and anything like that. That authenticity, I think anyone who can see it would always value that, I think.